Today we're going to talk about steering, and you might be asking yourself, why do we need to talk about steering? You turn to the left, you go to the left, you turn to the right, you go to the right. But Habibi, there is a lot more to it. We need to talk about maneuverability, the boat's pivot point. We need to talk about the rudders. We need to talk how to keep course, how to steer, and how to counter steer. So get your pen and papers out and let's start the shut. Hello, my name is Oran. I'm a sailing instructor and I know how complicated sailing can be. This is why I started this series of breaking down sailing. I want to feed it to you in small bits so that we can get geeky on the theoretical stuff, get sexy on the practical stuff, and talk about the stuff that are often not talked about, like the captain's mindset, communication with the crew, and communication with yourself. So help me spread this free education by sharing, subscribing, and liking this video. And let's get right into it. Welcome to Breaking Down Sailing with Oran Teach. Chapter 1, Maneuverability. A question to you. I'm right now on a boat that is tied to the dock, with a little bit of slack, of course. If I go to the helm right now and I move it all the way to the left or all the way to the right, will the boat move? I will give you 3 seconds to think about it. Well, what is the answer? The answer is, it depends. Okay, I tricked you right there, but I got you to stop and think for a second. And this is how you should learn sailing, or pretty much anything else you learn, by understanding stuff, not just remembering. For the boat to turn, you need to have water flowing on your rudder. If you have water flowing on your rudder, you have maneuverability. If water is not flowing over your rudder, you don't have maneuverability. So even if you are tied to the dock and there is some sort of a current in the marina, you will move the helm and you see how the boat turns. This is how I actually check if there's a strong current inside the marina, by just turning the helm while I'm still tied to the dock and see if the boat turns. Same goes for the opposite rare scenario, that if you're out there and you get stuck in some sort of a current that just takes you, your speed over ground is actually not zero because you're moving in relation to the ground, but your speed over water is zero, which means that there is no actual water flowing over your rudder. You will try to turn the helm and you see that the boat is not responding because you don't have water flowing over your rudder. Your speed over water is zero. You have no maneuverability. Chapter 2. Pivot point. It's 2011, planking is still a thing, and you decide to take a picture while planking on a pole. If I decide to kick you in your right leg right here, where would you spin? Like this, right? And if I slap you in the face on the same side, would you spin the other way? If I push you behind the pivot point, you will spin differently as if I would push you from the front of your pivot point. Well, a boat is the same, only not lame. Yeah, so a monohull's pivot point is actually situated somewhere around the mast and the keel, and it will shift depending on if you're going forward or backward. In a general rule, if you're going backwards, that point will shift more towards the stern and will shift more forward when you're going forward. But every boat has a different pivot point, because monohulls, catamarans, trimarans, long keels, deep keels, whatever, you need to go out there and understand your own boat's pivot point and turning radius. You need to go out there and do some turning and try to visualize your turning radius and how well you are turning when going forward or when going backwards. If you need help with visualization, check out the first episode in this series, Visualization. But like I said, on monohulls, that pivot point is usually situated on the first third of the boat. So that means that when you're turning, you're actually swinging your stern pretty hard and they might hit something. So always pay attention to your stern when you're turning in close quarters. Chapter 3. Rudders. Now, rudders is that long thing that sticks in the water in the back of your boat that for some reason orcas like to play around with. It could be fiberglass, aluminum, carbon, it could be a cabin wooden door, it could be a spinnaker pole, and it could be your uncooked leftover pasta. Whatever that can stick in the water, pivot on a point, and generate some turning force. In simplicity, when water flows over the rudder and you decide to turn it to the right, think about which side now has more pressure, the left side or the right side. What do you say? It's the right side, right? That's where the water particles bash into the rudder, reflect off, and create a high pressure point. On the left side, the water flow faster actually, and that faster flow creates a low pressure. So now that we've got a high pressure on one side and a low pressure on the other side, that difference in pressure generates a lift force that pushes the rudder in a specific direction. And since we're pushing behind the pivot point, as we discussed earlier, the boat will turn this way. Now, rudders could have different shapes and different characteristics. They could be made from different materials, but they all follow the same rule, which is if you give them a bigger angle, you'll create more pressure, more lift force, and your turning will be harder. You'll have a smaller turning radius. The rudder pivots on its front edge. That's why when you're going forward, you don't feel that the rudder is trying to push you to either side. But when you're going backwards, a slight angle will cause water to try and push your rudder to either side, and if you don't hold your helm strong, it can go all the way to the end and break your entire chain. If you end up losing your rudders, it's a big problem, but I did hear about some stories of people managing to MacGyver a solution, like rigging a spare cabin door or the spinnaker pole, or using sea anchor, or just using the sails, the mainsail and the headsail, to steer to safe harbor. Some boats are equipped with a really long rudder, which gives you a lot of turning power and also gives you a lot more control when you're heeling, because there's a little bit more rudder still in the water to give you maneuverability. But it also gives you a higher chance to go and kiss some beautiful rocks. Some boats have twin rudders, which is a rudder on each side, which gives you really good control when you're sailing and heeling, but gives you very bad close quarter maneuvers because you don't have a prop wash. Now, what is a prop wash? We can talk about it in a future video. So again, like, subscribe, and share, and stay tuned for more. Chapter 4. Keeping course. You are cruising right now and your helm is in the center. The rudder is centered. Are you moving in a straight line? Of course not, right? Because this is not an ideal world. It's far from it. When you're cruising, even though your rudder is in the centers, there are still forces that push you sideways, like weather helm or the waves. You can turn good old autopilot on. That will help you keep course, but he doesn't always work. And I do encourage you to try and helming by yourself. There's nothing more meditative that connects you to the present moment than trying to keep course by using your senses. You start by putting the helm in the center, and the rudder is going to be in the middle. You know, there's not going to be difference in equal pressure on either side of it, and from there you need to feel when the boat's about to pull you to either side and counter correct by using the helm. And then remember to bring the helm back to the center so you don't keep on turning forever. And you do these small corrections while still maintaining a proper lookout and feeling with the wind if you are steering and pulling to either side, and this is how you keep course. Start practicing keeping course without visible landmarks. Go out to the open when you can't see anything and try to keep course by just using your senses, by looking at the water and the bow, by feeling the direction and the wind on your face, and try to make those micro adjustments every time you feel that the boat is pulling you to either side. You can even step it up a little bit and try to keep course with your eyes closed, you know, around and find out. Chapter 5. Steering and counter steering. Welcome to the practical part, finally. Now, remember that a boat is not a car and the sea is not a paved road. When you're executing a turn, if you don't bring the rudder back to the center, the boat will keep on turning. So to execute a turn to your destination, you will need to counter steer before you reach that destination in order for you to stop directly where you want the boat to stop. Now, this is a very important aspect that you need to remember in all the drills that you're using the helms in sailing. Practice it and it will come second nature. In some situations, you want to steer and turn fast. For instance, if you are trying to tack in wavy conditions and you want to avoid getting your bow getting smacked by a wave. And in some situations, you'll want to turn slow, which is pretty much any time that you don't want stuff flying around. But for instance, when you are tacking in calm conditions and you want to climb a little bit higher up into the wind. But whatever speed you are turning, it doesn't matter. Always look before you turn, because you might just have a power boat that's about to overtake you. Okay, let's recap. We talked about maneuverability. When water flowing over your rudder, you have maneuverability. When water is not flowing over your rudder, you don't have maneuverability. We talked about the boat's pivot point and how it can shift from going forward and backwards. We talked about rudders, the different types, and why you should always have a strong grip on the helm when you are reversing. We talked about how to keep course, how to practice it by giving small counter corrections every time you feel that the boat is pulling you to either side. We talked about steering and counter steering, how you should always look before you turn, and how you should remember to counter steer before you reach your destination. Now that we've talked about steering, we can move on to more complex subject in the sailing world. Like, share, and subscribe, and support this channel by using one of my services listed down below in the description. I'll see you in the next video.